Hello and welcome to Legislative Report with your state representative, Mark Gillen, representing the 128th District in Berks County. I'm your host, Herb Logan. Well, how does Pennsylvania go about protecting its citizens, especially in its biggest population centers, and against the kind of large-scale threat that might come from criminal or terrorist activity? We'll talk about that today with State Representative Mark Gillen.
Thank you very much for having me back. I always enjoy it, Herb.
Glad to have you. You know, you recently traveled to Pittsburgh to see some of the people, the technology, the machines used by that city to stay safe. And I want to show some folks, the folks at home, highlights of that visit. But first, you've just entered your second term in the State House of Representatives, correct?
Yes. I know it feels longer, but I was just sworn into office for my second term.
So besides representing the folks in Berks County in the 128th District, you also serve a function of serving on several important standing committees. Tell us what committees you are on.
I'm on the Education Committee. I'm also a certified educator, never been full-time in the classroom. I'm on the Labor and Industry Committee. And for some reason, they put me on the Aging Committee. I'm a little suspicious of the motivation behind that, but I am on those three committees in addition to Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness, which we're going to talk about.
Right, right. So each of those committees obviously deal with issues, bills, legislation that focuses on that particular area. Let's talk for a minute about the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee. Seems like two kind of maybe different things. How do they relate, and why are they all under the purview of one committee?
Well, if we had a Homeland Security threat, let's say we deployed the National Guard and there was some tragedy unfolding in Pennsylvania, the next phone call is going to go to EMS and then our firefighters. Right. And so there's a very logical nexus between Veterans Affairs and the threats the nation faces, as well as coordinating with our local first responders. And so they fit very nicely together. And
I know you have some background, some experience as a first responder. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've been an emergency medical technician coming up on close to 25 years now. I'm not currently running on an ambulance, but it's a passion that I have. It's another way to serve people, and it's also a way for our local community to be represented on that important committee.
Well, speaking of serving on committees and being part of emergency preparedness, that kind of thing, you recently participated in your committee's trip to Pittsburgh, as I alluded to a couple of minutes ago, and there you had a chance to see how that city meets the challenge of protecting its citizens. A couple of shows back, viewers got a chance to see how you out on the river with the river security and the police force that it's kind of an unusual situation where you have three rivers converging, a lot of water in Pittsburgh. You got a chance to see what happened there.
Yeah, it was very cold out on the river that day. Certainly wasn't a recreational jaunt, and to protect the taxpayers, I brown bagged it. Didn't spend a nickel on food while I was out there. I stayed overnight for one evening. And I think it's important for the constituent community to recognize when you're talking about education or Veterans Affairs, these are border-to-border issues that transcend the entire Commonwealth. And when we think about port facilities and the importance of keeping those secure, our minds easily drift to a Philadelphia or a New York or some other eastern port, but there's substantive barge traffic that's coming out of the Ohio and eventually into the Mississippi River. And we have to know what kind of eyes and ears are on those bodies of water and what security preparations have been made. Not long ago in the news, we had an oil spill out on the Mississippi River, and it can shut the river down. If you have a barge that goes down in Pennsylvania, it's going to substantially disrupt commerce. And so naturally, that would be a focus of our attention on Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness.
Right. Well, you also got the chance while you're in Pittsburgh to see the kinds of folks and also the equipment that they have to work with, those folks, police and Homeland Security, who do things on dry land as well, around the football stadium and elsewhere around the city. And that's what I want to show folks right now. Let's take a look at the highlights of some of the highlights of that visit.
We staff this area during games or any large events. Matter of fact, that whole area right there, we have law enforcement folks, dispatchers, radio operators that are staffed up in here for every event. And we're going to go out here and walk down around, and we'll be outside. We purchased these through the Region Task Force with Homeland Security dollars. These are mobile traffic control barriers. This plate will pull up, and this will stop a 55-mile-an-hour car, automobile. and prevent it from crashing a perimeter. So we have 3 of these. We primarily use them here during game day, but they're available anywhere really in the Commonwealth. You know, if Glenn calls them and says he needs them, they go. This is the exact model. The reason we picked this model is this is the model the U.S. Secret Service used for G20 when they closed on various areas of downtown and stuff for vehicles.
And we're out here to look at the command vehicle over in this direction.
All this equipment here was purchased with Urban Area Security Initiative dollars or state Homeland dollars from the federal government as to Region 13. You see the logo on the side? Any vehicle that was purchased with Homeland Security monies through the region will have that Region 13 logo on the side of it. You'll have them if you're a county in southwestern PA and there's one of those vehicles in your jurisdiction at home, that'll have that logo on. Wow. There's some folks in there to answer any questions you'd like to have. Feel free to go ahead in.
So this is our mobile decision-making room. We have access to 31 different radio frequencies. As you can see, we have 7 different computers. We can pull up, we have our incident management software. That dispatch console is exactly what our 911 center sees.
When this is fully staffed, how many people do we have in here?
It depends on the incident, but we're designed to keep about 7 people in this part continuously, and then for briefings we can get up to about 15 or 20. It gets a little crowded, but we do the briefing and then get everyone back on their way to do their tasks.
You're deployed here in front of the stadium. Where else will we find this vehicle?
We go on all major events, fires, bomb scares, police tactical activities, anything that's outside the realm of a normal everyday command and control event.
Was this asset available for the summit, the G20 summit?
Yes, it was. We had this and another one staged, ready to go wherever they needed to go.
What other vehicles would likely be accompanying this?
At this point, this is pretty self-sustaining. So we can operate, the city has a mobile fuel truck if we need it, and we can bring our food and water in as we need to. We go out the door just with 1-pack MREs and some water. That keeps us going for a while. Hopefully we don't get to that point.
Ballpark number on the dollar value of the asset fully equipped?
1.4-ish, 1.4 million.
Department of Homeland Security?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And there's some concern about some of those assets perhaps drying up?
Yeah. At the rate where our funding's going, we would never be able to afford to replace this or at this point maintain it. It's a very expensive truck, very expensive to maintain. It has a bank of batteries. We're right now operating off a generator, even though we have 150 amps of 12-volt power run through a bank of batteries. It costs us $1,000 every year to replace, so very expensive to maintain.
You take this asset out into the field, we have a crisis. How long can this remain independent and self-sufficient?
With the fuel on board, we can go about 12 solid hours if we were full when we left. It carries 50 gallons of fuel, which sounds like a lot, but it's a big, heavy vehicle. And the reason we only carry that much fuel is to get all the other assets we have here. So we can go about 12 hours before we need anything. And, getting a little bit of fuel is not a big deal.
My name is Alan Housen. I'm Chief of Pennsylvania Strike Team 1, which is the Pennsylvania Urban Search and Rescue in-state resource. We're trained to the same level as the federal teams. We're just a little bit smaller than they are. What we have here is our main rescue truck. This is, we call it our Rescue 1 truck. It carries a bunch of specialized collapse rescue equipment designed to breach, break, and search for victims in a collapsed structure. What we have on the table here is some of the specialty items we have. We have a lot of concrete saws. This is an arc welding tool. It'll actually cut through metal or even cinder block if you had to. We carry a lot of cutters. This will cut up to 1 5/8" rebar. If we get to a situation where a building's collapsed, we can cut through. Again, a lot of chipping equipment. We have about 5 different size electric chipping hammers to go in and breach concrete. What you see here is our search cam. What the search cam allows us to do is go out about 7 feet, go through a little 1.5-inch hole, and we can look through on the other side, look and listen for a victim that might be trapped. We can talk with the victim, learn where they are, and that way when we take our breaching equipment in, we know how not to get in there and injure the patient. What John has over here, he's got the headset on. This is called our DELSAR unit. As you can see the lights going up and down, we have 2 sensors on the ground, and they're sensing all the noise that in the area around us, from the generators, the vehicles are walking. And what this does is if we do have a victim trapped deep under rubble, it allows us to help triangulate where that person is. And by using all 6 sensors, we work our way down and we come to exactly where the victim is and begin to tunnel down to where we might find them. We have a second vehicle which we keep in the other end of our district, and it allows us to get quicker into any situation we may have to come across.
I'm Chris McNowski, a sergeant with the City of Pittsburgh Police Department, and also one of the training hosts of the Region 13 Canine Program. The task force in southwestern Pennsylvania encompasses 13 different counties and municipalities that participate in our canine program. We have 12 dogs in that program, and they're utilized for explosive detection. They're trained up to 20 different odors, and they're used for threat mitigation, VIP type sweeps, and also additional safety measures for public safety personnel at bomb scenes and those types of incidents. Our dogs are all dual trained. That means that they're trained for this explosive detection capability and also patrol functions. So they have this additional ability. It's a buy-in for the local law enforcement agencies that dedicate a full-time officer or deputy to participate in the program. Because quite honestly, fortunately, our explosive detection, we're busy at certain times of the year in certain election cycles, but we're not all that busy. So that's a good thing. But the other side of the dog is the patrol functions. And what we do on that side, typical crime prevention. It's a typical police dog. It will pursue an apprehended criminal if need be. It'll search a building, a wooded area, or an area search, or do a track for an endangered person. So there's 2 sides of the dog, and it's an excellent buy-in for the task force, the participants. When they're getting an explosive detection dog, they're also getting a patrol dog. And we find about 70, maybe 80% of our work is on that patrol side. And it's absolutely a very effective tool for law enforcement. And as you can see, he's extremely social, very approachable. But if we were to say the magic words, he would turn into the atypical police dog.
And you're not going to do that, are you?
Oh, we're absolutely not. This is Barchi. He's a Belgian Malinois. He's about 4 years old, and he lives with me at home. He's been on the job for us here in Pittsburgh and the region for about 2 years. He's extremely effective at what he does. In fact, we kind of have him as our demo dog. He is one of the dogs that's extremely social, as you can see, and very, very approachable. He's good at home, good with the wife and the kids and the cats.
That's what he wanted.
All right. This particular breed, they're very, very affectionate. The German Shepherds like to be petted, but they like to be left alone as well. This dog will pretend he's a lap dog. He thinks he's about 12 pounds. Clearly, he's not a 12-pound lap dog.
Well, hello, I'm Detective Carlos Schrader from the Pittsburgh Police Bomb Squad. Today we have a few items that we've brought out to show people. And the first one we have is right here, which is called a pan disruptor. It's a percussion actuated, non-electric pan disruptor. And this is one of the tools that we use for disrupting a suspicious package or a device. Next, what we have here is our bomb suit. This is the EOD-9 suit. And this is made by Medenge, and this is our go-to tool inside the bomb world. Every bomb tech has to put this on every time there's some sort of device or package that's out there or suspicious item. We need to suit up in this to give us protection. It has ballistic protection all the way from the legs up through the body, and it's hard, along with the Kevlar protection on the shell. What we also have here on our table are some of the items that we use. This here is a rigging kit. Just for some reason we have to move an item from where it's sitting in a dangerous area. We need to move that item away. We will pull out this kit and start moving things around. We can clamp onto it. We can rig it through different pulley systems and hooks that we have. And the whole idea is to make it safe for the public. We don't want anyone to get hurt, no one to get killed, and plus we definitely don't want to do any property damage. So we try to make it as safe as possible by moving everything away. And some of the items that we have here also some of the things that we've received in the city of Pittsburgh. We've gotten calls for these items, and then we've been called to render them safe. And this here is a Law rocket launcher from the Vietnam era.
You can always remake. We take pictures, lots of pictures.
We have an RPG right here, rocket propelled grenade.
It's on hazardous devices.
Some of these items were hot, meaning that they were live when we did receive the call for them, and some were not. This here is an MK4 practice dummy round. It's what they use for cycling their weapon. to train our military. We get a lot of grenades in the city of Pittsburgh because years ago there used to be a munitions plant in the area, and they were bringing these home. Mom, Dad, Uncle Bill, or somebody was working, and he'd bring one of these grenades home. You see them sitting on their mantle or in their basement saying, hey, you kids don't touch that. Well, now they're passing away, and these are the items that we're getting that we don't know if they're live or if they're not. So we get a lot of calls, and a lot of these hand grenades are live grenades, meaning they will blow up. We have some pipe bombs that they made that we've gotten calls for. We have some 20-millimeter rounds that we've gotten a call for. These were actually laying in the edge of a creek bed. Notice the rusty side of the one shell that was laying on the edge of the water, and the moisture was wicked up into the rack. And one of our last but not least, our go-to tools, is our bomb robot. This is made by Remotech, a company in Tennessee. This one weighs about 400 pounds, and it has 4 cameras on it. We have a claw camera, we have a weapons camera, these are pan disruptors on the side. We have a camera between the tracks here, and our eye in the sky, which is this one here, a telescopic camera here. It goes up approximately 6 foot, spins around 360 degrees this way and 360 degrees this way. Along with this robot, it's actually a great tool because it's designed to go upstairs, and it can actually be gotten wet, so we don't have to worry about any water, any mud, or any muck that we may get into. And last, over here on the other side, is a control panel for it. And this is just to get it up. We actually have a control screen that once we hook into it, we can actually run this approximately 1,200 feet with a hardline fiber optic, or we can go with a totally wireless system, and we get about 1,500 to 1,600 feet within inside of the building.
Well, back with State Representative Mark Gillen, we saw your trip to Pittsburgh. Now, tell me why it was important for the committee to travel all the way out to Pittsburgh to see what goes on out there.
Well, it wasn't a recreational trip, I mentioned already. You're going to see us in front of ball fields, Heinz Field. I did not watch a football game. I did not watch a baseball game while I was out there. But it just occurs to me when we're talking about rivers and some of the elements that go into securing them, we actually have the Schuylkill River flowing through a portion of our district. You're not going to see barge traffic. There will be pleasure craft out there, but there'll be some emergency rescues that have gone on in the course of the last couple of years. Pollution is a concern, drinking water. So we have some of those safety elements, and some lessons from Pittsburgh and the experience out there are gleanable for our own backyard and our own community. When we're on the waterfront there in Pittsburgh at Heinz Field, you have to think about large population centers, and wherever large communities of people aggregate either recreationally on a temporary basis or where they reside in their own communities, those become places that we need to really take a closer look at because they could potentially be vulnerable. And for all the things that go on behind the scenes in putting a major sporting event together, both in athletic preparation and vendors, the police and law enforcement and indeed Homeland Security have a voice. The Super Bowl is probably the consummate example of going through metal detectors and making sure the environment is safe, but not just the environment inside of the stadium, the environment in the parking lot, the environment in the air. And when you have these ballpark venues that are sitting right on the river, then the waterfront being safe becomes an issue as well.
I should also mention one of the other reasons why your committee traveled to Pittsburgh, you and your committee members, was to hold a public hearing on legislation for which you sought the opinions of folks in Pittsburgh, Homeland Security folks, police folks. You wanted to get their testimony on that legislation.
Yeah, one of the important functions of the committee is not just hearing what's going on in my backyard. I have to say that I pay the most attention to what people are saying in the district. But when we're talking about the reach of Homeland Security, it goes the breadth of the state. And I need to hear what first responders are saying in Pittsburgh and Erie and other places. I have actually been rather de minimis with overnight traveling, just 2 occasions up for the Marcellus gas region, was actually on a rig, and then out in Pittsburgh. So I try to take long day trips, but it is judicious of us to be aware of what people are saying in these communities that have large venues and riverfront particularly.
Very good. Well, we have a few minutes left in the program, and I want to kind of switch to the other part of the committee's activities. It's called the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness. We talked a little bit about the emergency preparedness side of things. Now I want to switch to Veterans Affairs. I know, first of all, that that's a topic near and dear to your heart. Talk about the commitment that you make to veterans, especially in your job.
Let me just say a word about my own family. My dad was a World War II veteran. He was in the machine gun terror of a torpedo plane. He was in the South Pacific off the USS Hancock, the aircraft carrier. So once you have that in your bloodstream, it's really never going to leave you. And I think it's important for citizens today, young people especially, to be aware and cognizant of the sacrifice of those that went before us. One of the things that I like to do on the floor of the House of Representatives is to share resolutions. One that's coming up is a resolution commemorating the 70th anniversary of the victory in Guadalcanal. There was enormous sacrifice. If I say Guadalcanal, people are thinking, yeah, I've heard of that, but where is that place at? In the southern Solomon Islands, a jumping off point conceivably to attack Australia in the opening months of World War II. And it was critical that the United States procure that island and disable the Japanese influence there, and also secure the airfield that was being built by the Japanese. And so these resolutions are, as much as anything else, reminders of specific events, of the individuals and the role that they played, and the sacrifice and the commitment that they made, and some paid the ultimate price for protecting our freedom.
Tell us about some of the other resolutions. I believe one was on Pearl Harbor. You've done other things as well.
Yeah, and this is going to move me again emotionally because I had 3 Pearl Harbor survivors come in commemorating the 70th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and that was December of 2011. Within a year, 2 of those 3 heroic veterans stepped out into eternity. So 3 of the individuals that were publicly acknowledged during the course of that resolution and were introduced on the floor of the House of Representatives has passed away. We have another survivor in Berks County who came and was with me that day. So if we don't say thank you now, when will we have that opportunity? And right now I've spoke to a Guadalcanal survivor in Berks County, and there is a possibility that he'll come and join us for the reading of that resolution on the floor of the House of Representatives.
And you've also done a couple of other things that I want to mention, one of which I was privileged to be part of, and that is to get the thoughts and the words and the stories from these veterans actually recorded for kind of archival purposes.
I was in a church visiting one Sunday, and a gentleman came over to me and said, do you know that just down the road there's a Pearl Harbor survivor in a nursing facility? And I'm friendly with him, and it sounds like you would be interested in intersecting with him, and I was. And I went and met with him, and he took me back to his room, and he said, Mark, there were 12 of us who used to go out into the schools and share personal testimonial of our Pearl Harbor-based experience. And he looked at the picture and just stared at it for a couple extra seconds, and I was waiting for him to say something. He goes, and I think I'm the last one alive out of that group. Wow. I went back and visited him a second time. And then the third time we went and we filmed some of his reminiscence from Pearl Harbor, some of his background. He's very lucid, he's very clear. As you can imagine, these earliest of the early entering the Second World War at Pearl Harbor, they're already in uniform in 1941. They're all into their 90s. And so I've been very fortunate to partner with you and your team to capture some of these testimonials and then eventually package it so we can go back into the public schools when these voices eventually are silent. We will have it.
And as you've said, these are stories of commitment, of self-sacrifice, of dedication to a cause greater than themselves. These are all worthwhile values to share with our younger generations, many of whom hopefully won't have to go through that same kind of learning process of learning these values in the same way.
It's critical that our young people today, and really the culture as a whole, recognize the importance and the value of sacrifice. And if we cease to sacrifice as a nation and we withdraw ourselves from a willingness to make that commitment and indeed, if necessary, pay the ultimate price, I wonder if the Republic can endure. And some of these flesh and blood examples that are still with us have such compelling stories to tell. I remember Lyle Koenig, Pearl Harbor survivor in Upper Berks County, and he said to me, when I entered the service, it was a piece of cake, and it was startling for me to hear that, and I'm going, what's next? Because he was out working on a farm. He was working hard in his community. He was putting in, dusk to dawn, dawn to dusk type days. And I said, you know what? The character was manifest on the battlefield. The character already existed. It just needed a platform to shine on. And they went back into their communities and they picked up where they left off. And it was not something that was markedly talked about or bugled, that courage. And so to draw these stories out now sometimes is difficult. There's a certain reluctance to tell that story, but it's a story that needs to be told. And you have wonderfully given of your time and energies and expertise to help us to tell that story.
Well, I look forward to working with you to help get that story out. That's going to be a lot of, it's going to be inspirational for me, and I hope it will be for everyone who sees that as well. But that's to come. I want to have you talk in these last couple of minutes about one more thing, and it has to do with, again, your dedication to veterans and what they've been through. You've even devoted office space to create what I'm going to call a little memorial, in fact, room in your office. Talk about that.
Yeah, and I think that properly characterizes a memorial. I first occupied the office 2 years ago, and as you walk from the outer office into my back office, there was a medium-sized room and it was full of filing cabinets. And as time went on, I said, we could probably put those filing cabinets back in a nook or cranny. Some of them we didn't actually need. On the other side of the office, and I just had in my mind's eye a display to memorialize those who'd served from our own constituent community or nearby. I put a case up with my dad's air medals. He's been dead for over 30 years now, and a picture of him from the Second World War. And there were a number of other men and women who served from our community. Some have passed on. Lyle Koenig's story is up on the wall there as a Pearl Harbor survivor. He lies just outside of the district. So it's a community treasure, not just defined by the bounds of the legislative district. And it tells some of those stories. And then we have a book with personal testimonials on 4x8 cards. You can send in a special word of remembrance. It wasn't just about heroic deeds, though we end up receiving some of those testimonials, but a bit of irony, an unusual story from your service, which transcends all wars. There is a bit of an accent from the Second World War, but we're going to be honoring, by virtue of House resolution, those that committed themselves in Korea as well. So I would encourage anyone from our constituent community who hasn't been by the office to allow me to take them on a little personal tour. It's not long, it'll just take a couple minutes, but I think they'll enjoy it, and I think they'll appreciate even more what they have in their own community. It's
a great reason to stop by. It's also a great way to get folks who may be out there and have some things to share. If they know someone who's been who's a veteran or are veterans themselves, they can come in and maybe contribute some material for your room.
We have that happening on an ongoing basis where folks come by and their memory is stirred of a neighbor, friend, or sometimes even their own personal experience. We had someone come in that was a POW and I didn't know they were even out in the community, and they shared their story in front of a group of other people. It's fascinating to read through these little notes that the veterans leave there. Some of them I'll never forget.
I hope folks stop by and take advantage of that. We're out of time. I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you very much for having me again, Herb.
And that is all the time we have for this month's program. If you have any questions for Representative Gillen about what you've seen and about his work with the Veterans Affairs and Emergency Preparedness Committee, or if he can assist you with any state government matter, please contact him at his district office or through his website. That information will be on your screen in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us next time for a legislative report with your state representative, Mark Gillen.